joyous city, whose antiquity is of ancient days. Her own feet shall carry her afar off to sojourn. Who hath taken this counsel against Tyre, the crowning city, whose merchants are princes, whose traffickers are the honorable of the earth? The Lord of hosts hath purposed it to stain the pride of all glory, and to bring into contempt all the honorable of the...
Hello, good morning. Welcome to Line by Line Bible Studies. We're continuing the book of Isaiah. We're in chapter 23. The burden of Tyre. Let's get here for the music there. And once again, this chapter is going to emphasize, among other things, we're going to see things here, we're going to learn things, and we're going to get new insight on prophetic themes. Because if you notice, I pointed out throughout Isaiah, the themes prophetically that the Old Testament prophets used are the same themes that the New Testament also uses. The book of Revelation, even the things that Jesus said on the Mount of Olives. For example, we were doing the burden of Egypt, and I don't remember if I mentioned it at the time, but as I was working on the music for it, because once I got to that song, I had no music, and I was thinking about it, and so I went back to work on it. And I was like, that part where it says nation against nation, kingdom against kingdom. I will set the Egyptians against the Egyptians, nations against nation, kingdom against kingdom. And that should be familiar. That's the same prophetic theme that we see, meaning the idea that nations are against nations and that God is in the midst of it. Because that's an important part of it. Nation rises against nation, but the will of God and the plan of God is being executed in spite of all that. But not just in spite of all that, a lot of that is part of the plan. It's not so much the plan as the planned execution. So, just like I said, I remember when I went back over it a couple days ago, I was looking at verse 3, and I was like, oh yeah, did I even mention that? Did I point that out? Where it says here, I'll set the Egyptians against the Egyptians, every man against his brother, every man against his neighbor, city against city, kingdom against kingdom. Now, though that, I'm not saying that this is exactly parallel to what Jesus says, but the fact that he says it about the end times and its prophecy, it's like a prophetic phrase. You know what I mean? It's almost not even a theme. It's just the language the prophets use. It's very similar, is what I'm saying. It's just another, that theme, nation against nation, kingdom against kingdom, obviously, because prophecy has to do with big events. Otherwise, why send a prophet? No one sends a prophet to announce something mundane, like the birth of a child. I'm just kidding. I just said that on purpose, because I actually first entered into my mind like something mundane. I'm like, what? Like what? Like a childbirth? That's normal. Of course, we already had in Isaiah childbirths announced, and also, of course, the most famous childbirth of all, which we don't even have to say which one that is, was a prophetic event. But I do mean like just normal stuff, Like God doesn't send his prophets to tell people it's going to be an average year. Just doesn't send prophets for that. It's going to be an average year. Nothing particular, nothing outstanding, so say the prophets. That's more like a prognosticator. That's more like a soothsayer. Because they have something to say about everything. The prophets speak when God speaks. They don't have something to say about everything. You know what I mean? It's not like you go to a prophet and you're like you're seeking to a medium who can give you, tell me about my mother's earrings. Where are they? She died and we don't know where my mother's earrings are. Go to the prophet, he'll know. That's not the kind of prophecy we're interested in. No. We don't contact God for mendacity. We contact God to enter into the kingdom of God, and that we might be acceptable to God in that kingdom. The blood of Christ is upon us. The other day someone left a message on one of the studies. I think it was the last study we had, and they were like, "So you believe in sinless perfection?" And I thought, that's an odd thing to say just right on top of my study. I'm like, did I even talk about sinless perfection? It's always funny people say sinless perfection like that. And just before we get going here, totally, let me just mention, for one, that someone mentioned that in the chat. Like I said, and I don't even understand. I kind of understand what it means. They mean people who believe that you can be sinlessly perfect as human beings in this present world. That it's attainable. Not only attainable, usually, as far as I'm concerned, people who actually believe in sinless perfection, the ones I've encountered say that, like, it's sort of what happens right after you believe. Like, you believe, and then they had the magical power of God come over them in some way, shape, or form. I mean, I'm not saying that in jest or in mockery. I mean, I similarly had an experience where I felt the power of God come over me, and it was quite magical. So, I'm not mocking it. I'm just saying. Okay, so they have something powerful happen. And then they stop sinning. So the thing is, when I got the Holy Spirit, I did stop sins that I had been big things that had been just part of my daily life. I don't like to mention some of the things because it grieves some of my loved ones to talk about the past things. I don't want to mention it over and over again. But I mentioned it before. Yeah. So I got delivered from many sins. And I thought in my mind, because I was listening to people who believed in sinless perfection, that perhaps I was perfect. I kind of thought I should be. I mean, the power of God had come over me. That should be it. From that point on, it should be like no doubt, right? You should do all the right things. And I found it not to be true. It didn't happen. So I don't believe in that kind of sinless perfection because I didn't find it. And because that would be God's responsibility. If I believed in sinless perfection in a Christian context, it would have to be Jesus that does it to me. And I think I advocated for that. For people to look for the power of God to deliver them from their sins. As opposed to just trying to make yourself perfect. But I do teach the idea that sinless perfection is the goal, because Jesus was perfect and sinless, and he is our role model. We are made after his image. We are imitating him and trying to be like Christ. So I live my life in pursuit of sinless perfection because of my love of the Lord, but I do not believe that sinless perfection is just something that just happens, can someone be sinlessly perfect? Can someone be perfect and sinless? Well, it depends on what kind of time frame you're talking about. You know what I mean? It's like, if you're talking about over a lifetime, never. You will not be sinless and perfect because you started off a sinner. So if you say, well, what about just the latter part of their life? Just from the time they meet the Lord. It's like, well, some people have claimed that since they met the Lord that they never sinned. I don't believe them, actually. I want to believe them, but I don't believe them. Because oftentimes I've talked to them and found, you're just excusing yourself because you're being a jerk right now. And I think you're being a sinner right now, and you're telling me you're perfect. You know what I mean? So I'm already getting sinful vibes off you, so I don't believe you. I've never met a sinlessly perfect person who actually seemed to be perfect. They seem to be kind of an a-hole, So I don't find that the belief actually does people any good to believe they are sinlessly perfect. I teach Jesus was perfect and sinless. Also, there is the idea of perfection. People say, well, perfection just means complete. Yeah, well, once you complete the whole sin thing and you get that all straight and perfect in order, you will be sinless. I mean, so perfect if you're talking about the realm of sin, if you're perfect in the realm of sin, it is a sinlessness. If you're perfect in the realm of patience, you have perfect patience. If you're perfect, so it depends on what realm. So I believe in perfection. You can have perfect things. Like you can perfect certain gifts. God willing and helping you, you can perfect many things. Sinlessness, though, can you perfect it? Well, since I'm working on it my whole life, it wouldn't actually surprise me if by the time I died, I had been perfect for maybe 10 or 20 days. Or maybe 2 or 3 years. I mean, sinlessly perfect. You know what I mean? Maybe I hadn't done sin for days, weeks, months, years. I don't know. When you get to be old, the opportunities for sin so much dry up. I mean, when I was young, since a lot of my sins were driven by my sexual desires, even at 50, I already know that they're significantly diminished just from having them fulfilled, partially. But also, just the fact of getting older does something to you. You lose your libido or whatever it's called. So, I don't teach sinless perfection, that you need to be sinless perfection to be saved or anything like that. I believe sinless perfection is the promise of Jesus Christ to you that will be in his kingdom. Meaning, I know that when we get to the kingdom of God, we're going to be sinlessly perfect. And technically speaking, because of the blood of Christ, I'm sinlessly perfect right now. Because the blood of Christ has washed away all my sins, and there are no sins on me. And I haven't committed any right now. I don't think I told you any lies. So, there you go. I'm sinlessly perfect. Is it going to last? I don't think so, because I want it to last. Why not, Paul? Why won't it last? I don't know. Why won't you last? And here's what happens. Is once you convince yourself that you should be sinlessly perfect, what happens is because you're just not, you will find ways to deceive yourself to say you are. And that's what I saw myself doing pretty quickly when I first received the Holy Spirit. But I saw that trap immediately. I'm like, because as soon as I sinned, I saw myself making excuses for it. And then I thought, I saw what just happened. And then I realized from then on, I knew what the trap was. And I saw friends in it who were in the trap of like, I can't admit I do anything wrong because I'm sinless and perfect. I can't admit a fault. I can't admit I will sin. I don't admit I will sin. It's just the question of like, if you're a betting man, I would not put my money on me because I'm not that good. All right. Certainly, because there's so many small ways we can sin in anger or lose patience. There's so many little ways we can go astray in word or in deed. So it's like the idea that I won't sin with my tongue again. There's some things that sometimes I'm so stubborn about when I get angry. It's like, God help me, I don't listen. I just get angry. And I know it's wrong. It's like, but in the moment when I'm caught in the passion, that's the thing. It's like as long as you have the human passions and stuff, without the fullness of the divine nature to control it. Well, it's okay if we eat away 15 full minutes in this study. It's an important thing because it came up in the last study. Someone asked it. You teach sinless perfection? No, I don't. Yes, I do. Both. You know what I mean? Not the way you're talking, but in a certain sense, yes. That Jesus Christ was sinless and perfect, and that we also ought to be sinless. We ought to be sinless and perfect. I do say that. We ought not sin. With Christ's sacrifice in view of all he did for us, putting himself on the cross willingly, knowing the torment ahead of time and suffering it, being able to free himself from it, at least by power. He couldn't defy the will of God. He wouldn't. But the point is, when you have that in mind, and the call to righteousness that has gone off from the Lord, of course, I want to be perfect. I want to be sinless. And I want to encourage people to be perfect and sinless. Be perfect as our Heavenly Father is perfect. Here's the thing, the New Testament is a document that pushes sinless perfection. If you read it, it's pushed all over the place. But, like I said, but the context in which you understand that idea of perfection as a goal to be attained, as a goal to be reached for. You always make your goal the highest, best thing. You don't set your goal, say like, well, I'm going to go to the race and I'm going to try to come in second. Who does this? I'm going to try to take second place. I mean, maybe, but that's not a true winner's heart. You know what I mean? It's like the guy who's like thinking I'm going to take second has already counted himself out. Exactly. With righteousness, I don't go and say like, I'm going to fail. I'm going to sin. I want to say I'm going to do what's right. I'm going to positively affirm that. Not to make myself a liar later on, but just because that is the true intent of my heart. And I'll reinforce that to God. I'll reinforce that to men. I'll reinforce that to myself. I don't want to sin. And so there are a lot of people who feel that way. But but the idea of like actually becoming sinless early in your life or early in your Christian walk, it would take a remarkable person, because God just is not handing those gifts out like that. I would have encountered it several times. The people who God perfects, like just on the, he makes them perfect. They're like 30, they're perfect already. you know, because that's what the age I was. And when I think about what unfolded in my 30s and my 40s, at least the early part or whatever, or just the different things. It's not like it's all terrible or anything. But when I think about what unfolded in my 30s, I think, well, you know, that was not the worst, but it was certainly not the best I could do. You know, I'm better now than I was then. So it's not like God perfected me and I fell off the horse and got worse. It's just, no, he improved me, and then, you know, but it's like, sometimes it's like 3 steps forward, 1 step back. You know, I feel like that's my life. 3 steps forward, 1 step back. Or maybe 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Or maybe 1.5 steps forward, 1 step back. I don't care. Even if it's 1.1 step forward and 1 step back, that's still fine. I'll take that trade every single time. 1.1 to 1. I'll take that progress. I don't have to be getting twice as righteous every day. You know what I mean? To be able to say I'm headed towards perfection. To say I'm laying hold of the divine nature. Or at least pursuing it. So that's my take on the notion of sinless perfection. And I hope that's clear. You know, because sometimes people get confused about it. And, you know, I don't know what to say other than that. And I'll probably clip that 50 minutes for a special, okay? So now back to the burden of Tyre. That's a good subject to talk about anytime, isn't it? The burden of Tyre. Howl, ye ships of Tarshish, for it is laid waste. So there is no house, no entering in. From the land of Kittim it is revealed to them. Be still, ye inhabitants of the isle, thou whom the merchants of Zidon that pass over the sea have replenished, and by great waters the seed of Sihor. The harvest of the river is her avenue, and she is a mart of nations. Let's try to read that sentence. The punctuation is weird. A mart of nations, be thou ashamed, O Zidon, for the sea hath spoken, even the strength of the sea, saying, I travail not, nor bring forth children, neither do I nourish up young men, nor bring up virgins. As at the report concerning Egypt, so shall they be sorely pained at the report of Tyre. Pass ye over to Tarshish. Howl, ye inhabitants of the isle. Is this your joyous city, whose antiquity is of ancient days? Her own feet shall carry her afar off to sojourn. Who hath taken this counsel against Tyre, the crowning city, whose merchants are princes, whose traffickers are all the honorable of the earth? The Lord of hosts hath purposed it, to stain the pride of all glory, and to bring into contempt all the honorable of the earth. We'll hold there. It goes on a bit. So Tyre gets a lot of attention in the Bible. Tyre was King Hiram of Tyre. Hiram? I'm not sure how to pronounce it. I think that's the name. Hiram, King Hiram of Tyre. Do I look it up? Nah, let's not look it up. Who cares? Whole point of having me is so you don't have to look it up. I'm just kidding. You can look it up. Maybe I'm wrong. But the king of Tyre, during the building of the temple and the house, he supplied Solomon with the Tarshish ships that brought about the cedar of Lebanon being brought down and they brought the gold and the you know, that's what the Tarshish ships kind of served Solomon, because at the time of Solomon he was the power of the region. Tyre, as it's saying here, you understand, Tyre is a merchant city. It is a city that thrives based on its trade all over the Mediterranean. And the ships would go to Tarshish, you know, far away. I'm not sure where Tarshish is. You know, the ships of Tarshish, where have they gone? These ships are from, you know, they've gone off to Tarshish. And let me just make sure I got, because I thought that, I believe I learned a long time ago. It's like, sometimes you learn things and it's like, it's not the kind of thing that's very memorable. Like, Tarshish ships, it's this mysterious, etc., we don't know what it is. Perhaps Spain. I think I remember that. Perhaps Spain. And why not? Spain is far off. I believe there were significant metal deposits in Spain. Isn't Spain a place of tin and gold at one time? I mean, not tons. Obviously, the Spaniards had gold fever when they went to the New World. But definitely metals and stuff. I forgot what all came back in the Tarshish ships. But I mean, the thing is, you got Africa on one side of the Mediterranean, you have Europe on the other. I mean, there's a lot of potential for different kinds of goods to be floating up to the Mediterranean for traders who regularly come around. So they regularly come around, and so Solomon is like the power in their home area, so he benefits greatly from their trade. As far as that, there's a close relationship between Israel and Tyre. Of course, Tyre likes to remain independent, and so they do, and they were not directly under the control of Israel or like the power part of the, David's empire, but they were a friendly allied nation. I mean, as far as they were, a lot of times when you have small merchant countries like that, they will make peace quickly with the new power because they're not at all interested. They will pay. I mean, they'll pay to an extent. But obviously, this is talking about, I know Tyre, of course, they did not. First of all, Tyre and Zidon are twin cities in modern Lebanon. Tyre used to be an island. There was an island out. It was Tyre. In fact, I believe means rock. Arlen Murray, my original teacher, who's a false teacher, but he used to say, "Not our rock." It's true. But the idea is Tyre is a rock, and obviously, you probably know where I'm going to go prophetically with this because there's a lot of similarities between Tyre and Mystery Babylon. Though obviously Tyre is not at all Mystery Babylon. Tyre represents something different. And what it represents is the merchants. The merchants. It's the city of trade, not the great whore so much as like the merchants, like the merchants' city, at least in this time. In the end times, the merchants are all they're all into Babylon. And they're all part of Babylon, and that's fine. Here, it's Tyre. Tyre represents the mercantile, merchandise type aspect of the world. The world trade. So let's look at the verses individually. Ships of Tarshish. I was looking into that. Oh, wait. I have my bifocals back. That's so great. Now I don't have to, I can just look down. Oh, that's so cool. And I can actually... Because before I had to go like this or like this. And now I just with these... I hate bifocals, by the way. If you ever try bifocals, you may find you hate them as far as, for walking around. But for sitting at a desk in front of a computer, it's perfect. I can look up there... I can look down here in a book, and if I want, I can put them a little bit out like this, and then I can have really close vision here for if I really want to inspect something. And for me, that's good. Because these reading glasses, you can't see stuff this close. I know. Now, why did I put Psalm 83, 1 through 18 as a note here? That's the thing I wrote. Why did I do that? Why did my younger self leave me that little breadcrumb, And that's funny, and I go, and the page has been dog-eared for some reason. And the psalm has gotten a bit of love. It's the whole psalm. Why did I put it in there? A psalm of Asaph. Let's just read it. Keep not thou silence, O God, hold not thy peace, and be not still, O God. For, lo, thine enemies make a tumult, they that hate thee have lifted up the head. They have taken crafty counsel against thy people, and consulted against thy hidden ones. They have said, Come, let us cut them off from being a nation, that thy name of Israel be no more in remembrance. For they have consulted together with one consent. They are confederate against thee. Oh, this one. Interesting. The tabernacles of Edom, and the Ishmaelites, of Moab, and the Hagarenes, Gebal, and Ammon, and Amalek, the Philistines, and the inhabitants of Tyre. Asher is also joined with them. That's Assyria. They have hope in the children of Lot, Selah. Do unto them as unto the Midianites, as to Sisera. Sisera is the one who got the spike in his head by oh, come on. Sisera, what was her name? It was like Jephthah? No, not Jephthah. Jephthah, the man left-handed. Who is the girl who put the spike in Sisera's head after giving him the nice warm milk? I forgot her name. Let me see. Maybe it's in my note here. Yeah, Judges 4:15. Oh, look, I opened right to the right page. We're going to know. Here we go. Sisera. Jael. Yeah. Jael. Yeah. Jael took a nail of the tent and a hammer in her hand and went softly into him and smote the nail into his temples and fastened it to the ground, for he was fast asleep and weary, so he died. That's how Sisera died. Jael put a spike in his head. Good girl. At the brook of Kishon, which perished at Endor, they became as dung of the earth. Make their nobles like Oreb and like Zeb, those two kings that were hacked in pieces. No, that was Agag, hacked in pieces by Samuel. Oreb and Zeb, the two kings of the, I forgot. Who said, let us take to ourselves the houses of God in possession. O God, make them like a wheel, as the stubble before the wind, as the fire burneth a wood, and as the flame setteth the mountain on fire. So persecute them with tempest. I like to say fire. Tempest. Make them afraid with thy storm. Fill their faces with shame, that they may seek thy name, O Lord. Let them be confounded and troubled. No, that they may seek thy name. You know, even the Old Testament prophets, they're saying, God, burn them down so they can seek your name. It is a funny thing to say. You know. Make them like wheel, make them like stubble before the wind. Persecute them with your tempest. Make them afraid with your storm. Fill their faces with shame, that they may seek thy name. I like that. That's why sometimes, like, it's appropriate. That's the thing. You understand? This goes back to things like Paul said, like, whom I have delivered unto Satan, that they may learn not to blaspheme. Because sometimes you deliver people to Satan. Sometimes you deliver people to destruction. In a sense, you say, look it, I give you, the only thing that can help you now is if God were to, you know, let's see one of the words, persecute you with his tempest and make you afraid with his storm. God needs to send a storm against you and make you afraid, you know, and make you ashamed, fill their faces with shame. Because at that point, when they know shame and fear and all those things, they may have the wisdom to seek the Lord. They may. Certainly in this world, I find no guarantees of that, but that is their hope. That's what I'm saying. For some people, the only hope is that they get knocked off their pedestal. Because as long as everything's all right in their life. Hey, look it. The truth is, I know when I was 19, I sought God out of fear. Because I thought I was going to die from a drug overdose. So I called on God. You know. And there's nothing like fear or or the stupidity or fear that comes from being stupid and getting yourself in trouble. You know, to wake you up perhaps. You know, some people don't wake up. But a lot of times people say you got to hit bottom before you can start making your way back up. So like drug addicts sometimes have to come to a point where they realize what a horrible situation they're in before they can be ready to receive the help that they genuinely need. Sorry, I have my mic so far away. I should just leave it where it is. We'll change the volume. So, Tarshish okay, the 1 Kings 10:22, there's a note, and I want to look at it, because I want to talk about the ships of Tarshish. 1 Kings what? What did I say it was 10:22? 10:22. There we go, easy. Just my fingers went so dry. 10:22 says, oh, there's a note. The navy of Tarshish Yeah, and here it says, yeah, cool. I was right about King Hiram, by the way. Yeah, let's just do this real quick. This is very much not a digression. This is actually pretty good for your understanding. This is good Bible study stuff. Here we go. Here we go. Let's look at 1 Kings 10. 1 Kings 10. And what was the verse? 22. Well, we're going to start at 21. And all King Solomon's drinking vessels were of gold, and all the vessels of the house of the forest of Lebanon were of pure gold. It was called the house of the forest of Lebanon because literally it was like, look at, you brought the forest of Lebanon to Jerusalem, and was the house of the forest. Yeah, see, there we go. Remember we talked about the house of the forest? Remember I wasn't sure what that was? Well, here you go. I don't know why it doesn't have it doesn't have like a reference to this point. Or did I miss that? Whatever. It's okay. You get what you pay for. Houses of the vessel of the forest of Lebanon were of pure gold. None were of silver. It was nothing accounted in the days of Solomon. Silver was like, that's what they said. For the king had at sea a navy of Tarshish with the navy of Hiram. Once in 3 years came the navy of Tarshish, bringing gold, silver, ivory, and apes and peak. Every 3 years, these ships would come. That's a long journey. I'm not thinking Africa. Apes and peacocks. I mean, that the Mediterranean. He must be going to the. I'm guessing they're going to the Atlantic coast of Africa or the north coast, Libya, I suppose. But I mean, I guess a 3-year trip around the Mediterranean. I don't know. I really don't know. But the point is that is the. And notice also, by the way, the navy of Hiram. It's Hiram. I was thinking it's Hiram because there's another. I was expecting there to be another I in there. It's Hiram, king of Tyre. That's Hiram. It doesn't say king of Tyre, but I know my king of Tyre. There's also a chapter with the queen of Sheba. See and the navy also of Hiram brought gold from Ophir. Hiram is mentioned earlier, I think. Whatever. It's not that interesting. I mean, but there you go. That's one to mention. That's how the ships of Tarshish kind of became a thing under Solomon, as far as it became famous. The Tarshish ships. Howl, you ships of Tarshish, it says in Isaiah, though. Howl! In the book of Revelation, there, alas, alas, that great city, wherein were made rich all that had ships in the sea. By reason of her costliness, the merchants all stand in their ships, watching the city burning in the book of Revelation, fearing from afar off, weeping and wailing and girding, tearing their clothes. I don't remember if it says, they probably didn't say tearing their clothes, but they often did that in the Old Testament, so why not throw that in? I said, weeping, and they're gonna well, I just want to drink coffee. They're going to look at her burning. When they see the smoke of her burning, they're going to weep and lament. Right from Revelation 17 and 18. I don't have to read that whole thing. I think, if you're sticking around for the Isaiah study, you probably should have done the Revelation study and Gospels. And this is one of the ones that's like, you have to have a lot of taste for it, As I was telling my wife, I was like, I admire guys who do like 3-hour-a-day talk shows. I probably could do this for 2 or 3 hours. Maybe not first thing in the morning. I don't know. But the point is, like, the funny thing is, you think to yourself, who would want to watch listen to a 3-hour talk show about the Bible? Where you're just talking about the Bible the whole time. No other, you talk about subjects, but it's like the Bible is your primary subject. I don't know. I mean, I know people who like that kind of level of, but I don't think you could be particularly in depth in 3 hours, but it's like politics. They just kind of talk and talk and talk. I don't know if it would work. like a genuine Bible study. It's intense for me. I don't know if I could do something. Like when I listen to people talk on the radio, they usually talk much slower, unless you're talking about someone like Ben Shapiro who talks really fast. Even that, though, I think there's more breaks and stuff. It's like sometimes I think the reputation he has is actually kind of, not particularly. He talks fast, but not, I don't know, significantly faster than people I know. I mean, it's like, but a lot of those guys do, some people are really good at measuring their words, and they talk slowly. But you know why I talk fast? Because in the middle of the sentence, if I talk that slowly, I'll literally forget what I was saying. That's not even a joke. I will literally forget in the middle of the sentence what I was trying to say. And the reason I talk is I talk fast and trying to keep up with my brain. Because if I don't keep up with the brain, what it wants to say, it'll get angry, it'll start forgetting things, it'll go other places, it'll leave me alone. It'll just abandon me, I'll be brainless and stupid. So I have to keep up with it. Be still, ye inhabitants of the isle, thou whom the merchants of Zidon pass over the sea have replenished. That means to fill, but replenish is fine here. It's the same word in Genesis. It means simply to fill up. Genesis, I refer to when he says to Adam and Eve, in Genesis either 1 or 2, where he says, go forth and replenish the earth. Be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth. Replenish there in the Hebrew means to fill. But the King James translators use this word replenish, which people assume means to fill again. But in the King James lingo, it didn't necessarily mean. Like meaning I have an empty cup, if I say replenish it, refill it, there's no separate word for fill. Like they didn't just have plenish my cup. They wouldn't say that. Fill the cup maybe? I don't know. But they chose replenish. And so the idea is the inhabitants of the isle, the merchants, they travel around, they bring back the riches. The people who benefit from that are the people of Tyre. The city itself benefits from the trade of the merchants. Their merchandise has a spillover effect that enriches the whole city. And it's obvious. Like some people put together ships and they said, we're going to send them off and bring goods back. We'll send a bunch of our stuff. And, they put the money together and they did it. And it's like, you think, I don't know, I don't want to go into the talk about economics, but it's like, it does sort of make me think, don't people realize that, that part of what makes a nation prosperous is not just that everyone makes the same amount of money, because some people can do amazing things with money and make it grow and stuff, like these merchants, merchandise is certainly not everything, but the point is everyone's worried when people do too, somebody's building ships and they're doing stuff and now they're taking over that, but no one was doing anything before. Innovation is costly and risky. And the people who take it, the point of taking the risk is so they could get the reward of it. So I don't know. In our nation, I feel like we have such animosity that's being pushed on people who are prosperous. And as you know, I'm a poor person, and I have but I defend them because I have no hatred for people who are prosperous because they work hard. I have no love for people who prosper because they cheat, or prosper because they take advantage of people, or because they swindle people. I have no sympathy with those people at all. And certainly a great amount of commerce is dirty stuff. And I don't mean dirty stuff like liquor and pornography. I mean dirty stuff like, tricking widows to buy something they don't need, or to buy, to spend money on, a service they don't need. Like for example, I get these emails now all the time about, thank you for subscribing to McAfee. Your year-long, thank you for purchasing your full Microsoft security package. Here's your receipt for your $500 purchase. And, they're trying to get you to come in and I didn't buy anything. Oh, okay, we'll refund you the money. Just give us your debit card. That's the kind of, you can see the scams coming from a mile away, and I feel bad that people ever fall into them. But, it's just, people gotta be told. But like, there's people out there just taking advantage of people, making merchandise of them, because that's all people are to them, merchandise. Like Jesus said, they will make merchandise of you. In religion, people are making merchandise of people. They're using, because it's look at doing less for you on a weekly basis. You can draw some kind of salary. I don't know. I don't want to rip on pastors, because there's all kinds. I don't want to make a general blanket statement about it, but let me just say this, that in the realm of Christianity, there are a lot of pastors out there. And by pastors, I mean priests, reverends, I mean leaders of local religious houses. If such things still exist, with the pandemic and all that, I haven't talked about it a ton, but I just, because, for years, the churches have disappointed me. And I'm sorry, this is a bit of a digression, but it's okay. Well, we're making merchandise. There's many ways, religion can be a kind of a commercial enterprise if done wrong, Nothing wrong with someone who's preaching the gospel, making a living, because they that preach the gospel sometimes of necessity must live from the gospel, as Paul said. It's not wrong, because it's a service that people value, But a lot of people get into religious service because they look at it as an easy job, or I don't know, or maybe they like being an authority over people. They want to be respected. I'm not sure. All I know is that over the past year, I watched churches just put their tail between their legs and close. We have a friggin' right to assemble. You know what I mean? And they closed. That's why, for the first time in years, I went to church during the pandemic, because they told me I couldn't. So I went. I went when it was illegal. Only because it was illegal, actually, because I don't really like to go to church. I don't mind. When I go to church, I mean the service to church service. You go into the building, you sit there, and you wait for them to talk, and then you leave. I don't do that. I don't like it. It doesn't seem to be edifying. I don't waste my time with unedifying activities. Like, I don't like going to church, going there on Sunday, and then walking away depressed, Because that's how church makes me feel. Because they've, for a long time, been failing people. And this past year, they failed utterly. I've never been, like I said, my whole life I've been looking at the church as a failure. And it's of course as it should be, by the way. But in part, I look at the religious leaders and I have indignation within myself, as according to the prophets did. And even if it's God's plan, for these false prophets to be in place, you know what else is God's plan? For there to be a really pissed off me in opposition to them. You know what I mean? He put them there to piss me off. That's why they exist, to anger me and to provoke me. On a certain level, I can look at it like that. I'm not saying that's like their whole purpose. I'm just saying on some level, because one time I was at a funeral and a guy came to me and I was talking just a little bit about the current situation in the world at the time, and this is like 6 months ago. And he's like, well, but if it's all the Lord's will, and he didn't say the conclusion, but I realized what his conclusion was then what, because I was writing music and I was telling how I wanted to affect things, and he's like, I'm trying to affect things. I'm trying to change the world, right? I'm trying to preach the gospel. I'm trying to also preach what's right as far as in this moment for human beings. It's not the gospel precisely, but it's righteousness. I'm preaching righteousness in my semi-secular music. I don't want to call it secular because it's still kind of Christian. It's like protest stuff. One second. But in writing that stuff, no. Talking to, is it God's will that all these things happen? That was the point. If it's God's will, then the idea is like, well, then you shouldn't fight it. If it's God's will that the false prophets be false prophets, if it's God's will that the Jews be blinded, is it wrong to preach the gospel to them? If the God's will is that the false prophets prophesy falsely, is it wrong to go out and fight them, to oppose them with your words? If, et cetera, et cetera. I think that's enough examples. And of course the answer is yes, you go out and fight them. If it's God's will they be there, it's also God's will that I fight them, that I oppose them every step of the way. Unless for some reason he gives me some information that there's some reason why I need to stand aside. Because the whole point of false prophets is for true prophets to oppose them. They're not to be just let run wild. You know what I mean? It's like saying that if the God's will that evil spirits be in the world, we should do nothing. We should not try to cast them out. Because if an evil spirit gets into someone, that was God's will. And it's what's called fatalism. And I wish I had time to talk with them, because it was like at the moment I was surprised to hear someone just say something so fatalistic. Like we should just have faith in God and fold our hands and let things happen. And that is a false notion. I don't see anything in the Bible that says we should just, accept as fate whatever is going to happen and just stoically receive reality as it comes to us without any attempt to shape it or influence it by word or deed. Because that is ultimate submission to God's will. My submission to God's will means I just sit here doing nothing and just let everything happen. Some people think that's what it means. They also think that's what it means if there's predestination, like that they should have no will. Like that if free will is somewhat of an illusion or something, or somehow not the bedrock principle of the human mind. I mean, if our human mind is not bedrock based on free will, but based on, let's say, whatever shape we happen to be. I mean, mental, whatever I am is what I do. You know what I mean? Meaning, it's not that my will is being constrained, like, I want to do this, but I can't. You know what I mean? I can't because I'm being made. My will isn't free. I'm in chains. That's like sin. Sin is an example of why you're not free. Because as soon as you try to stop sinning, you realize I don't have a free will. Like not in that loose sense. I mean, obviously I understand freedom of thought, right? Well, you have freedom of thought, all right. Point is, God knows everything, though. He knows your thoughts. He knows them before you think them. He knew your thoughts before you thought them and before you were born. So, when you're talking with God, all bets are off. Everything goes off the table. He knows everything. You can't get away from that. And so, from God's perspective, there's really no such thing as a totally free will. Like, no one's off there free willing and doing whatever they want. God is in control. We say that for a reason. But the thing is, God is in control, and part of what his control means is he wants me to go and do things. Go and do thou likewise. He said to if I walk along the road and I see a man beaten on the side of the road, should I say, well, it's God's will, I don't want to interfere? It must be God punishing him, because I wouldn't want to go over and help him and do good to him, because I might interfere with God's will. He's suffering right now. How do I know that's not God's will that he suffers? How do I know that I need to get in there and affect things? Why should I step in? So if the whole world's going haywire, why should I say anything? If pastors are closing down their churches, why should I say anything? It's God's will. They're just doing a bad job. If pastors are preaching lies, why should I say anything? It's God's will. Why should I oppose it? I should just sit back and fold my hands and watch everything happen. That's the parable of the talents. The guy with one talent, sit back, folded his hands, did nothing. And you know what God said to him? Get the hell out of here. Cast this man into outer darkness where the weeping and the grinding takes place. He's not one of my, you slothful and unprofitable, wicked servant is what he said. So we don't want to think that way. I really want to get back and tell that person that. It's like, that's not the right, like, I know no one lives like that. No one just folds their hands and does nothing. But the thing is, when they get to doing things that are uncomfortable for them, when I say, I want you to do something that's hard, when I say, I want to ask you to do something that may cause you some discomfort, when I say, I want to do something that may cause you social shame or loss, or may make you lose your damn job, you know what I mean? Or may make you lose your status, your friends, your family, others, and then you're like, I can't. Or you start saying, well, how do you know it's not God's will? And I almost swore right after that. How do you know it's not God's will? How do you know it's not God's will? Because it's evil. And God's will is never evil. You know what I mean? Well, wicked. How about that? It's wicked. And God's will is not. God's will is to bring the wicked into the world. But God's will is not that we should suffer wickedness to go on uninterrupted. And as much as it is in your power, you got to do what's right. As much as it's in your power to correct evil, you must do it. As much as it's in your power to stop the wicked, you ought to. You know, of course, that's what God expects you to do. And if you're not doing it, you're not in his will. I mean, when you're confronted with a situation where you should do the right thing, to not do the right thing is to not be in God's will. At least in that moment. I mean, as far as you're not doing what he really wants. His will in the sense of his desire. You may still be fulfilling his plan, because his plan is like, well, Paul's going to be confronted with a lot of choices. You know, because I'm going to train him up like that. He's going to be confronted with choices, and he's not always going to make the right choice. Sometimes he's going to make the wrong choice. But when he makes the wrong choice, he's going to suffer for it, because I'll ensure that there is suffering built into the system. So my servant, when he F's up, he can suffer. And when he suffers, he'll look back on the things he did and say, I did something wrong. And he's going to analyze, and he's going to look back and he's going to say, next time it's going to be like, and so the suffering works good. Suffering, not always is like pain and suffering, but it's like, it can just be the things you undergo. It can be mental suffering. I have a lot of mental suffering, a lot of mental torment, and it's good. Not all of it's good. Not all of it is profitable. But some of it is, and some of it must be necessary, because it is God's will. He puts things in the world that do frustrate us. He puts things in the world that do oppose us. So when all the churches are shutting down, I'm going to stand up and yell, hey, they should be open. These cowards, that they serve God, and they allowed the servants of men, meaning the leaders in this country are the servants of men. They are not kings, they're not our rulers, they are our servants. Everybody in Washington is my servant. They're all supposed to be serving my interests, not me personally, but us, right? And also us as individuals, right? They're not there to persecute individuals or to screw the nation. You know what I mean? Neither one is in their purview. But yet, when they do, they need to be opposed. And churches should have been out there opposing it. But the degree to which the church was absolutely MIA in the past year shows you how far they've fallen. They have no spirit. Not all. There's plenty of places where, but it's much like you see in Revelation. It's like a remnant. 2 out of 7 churches maybe are okay. And then in the other churches, you get some good people in churches. You have a few names even in Sardis that have not defiled their garments in that rotten old place, that rotten church. Because remember in the book of Revelation, Jesus threatens the churches. I've gone an hour. I've covered almost no scripture. That's okay. My wife said I should have started this study on Monday instead, since I got no sleep last night. Well, that's cool, because we'll have talked a lot about Tarshish. We're not going to go over that again. So let's talk about how he ships of Tarshish, for it is laid waste that there is no house, no entering, and from the land of Kittim is revealed to him. I hesitate to put this in the study. Well, this is a great study, a terrible study of, it's like I said, did I get the interpretation exactly right with Isaiah 23? No, but I'm also teaching the truth. So even though I may not be getting the passage exactly right, I'm not sure that this Bible study matches the passage. It's a good Bible study. I like this study. But it's not a good study of Isaiah 23. It's a good study of something else. It's a good study of what I'm... Well, there's some related stuff, no doubt, right? Because again, the mercantilism and making merchandise of things. And that was the whole point of talking about the religious world, because they make merchandise of you. And that's why I think they start to, that's the point. It's like, is it God's will that they make merchandise of people? Well, it's God's will that they be there doing that. But it is God's desire for us also to go in and oppose it. God wills that there be the conflict. But his desire from the conflict is that righteousness would prevail. But he does not, his will is not out the gate that wickedness will have nothing, they have no way to get at the righteous. The righteous are involved in a real conflict. It is not just this, totally neutral affair. That we get into it. They're involved. I'm involved. We're all involved in it, whether we want or not. We're either complicit or fighting it, or we're somehow, because sometimes neutrality is no good. Sometimes being neutral is like being for something. Like when Hitler was rounding up the Jews, it was not a time to be neutral, to be like on the fence. Like, well, it's maybe it's just God's will. We let it happen. Well, I guess it was God's will. In a sense, yes, it was, but it's also God's will that people oppose it. It was also God's will that afterwards it became, known. It's also God's will that, that because of that sin, the entire white race is racked with guilt over racism. Even though the whole world is guilty of it. All the other countries are racist. So much more so, and they don't care. We are the only ones who care. And I'm glad we care, because we're Christians and it's not right. I don't believe in racism. I believe in races, I just don't believe in racism. And I don't believe that there's nothing to races, by the way. Races, there's something to race, but it's not like the be-all, end-all defining factor any more than me being a man. There's a big deal about people are trying to break down the differences between everything. Because what they forget is that everything breaks down to the individual. And on an individual level, I'm the most unique human being on the planet Earth, just like everybody else. I'm just saying. Because I know I'm a bit different, but everyone's a bit different, right? Everyone's a bit different from everyone else. And that, and that truly, there's more about us, each and every one of us, that's the same than's different. Even the two most different people on the planet Earth have so much more in common, actually, than their differences. That's how I see the world. We have so much more in common between each other than you could take all the differences and you could make a big deal about them, but we could also make a big deal about the way we're all the same. And wouldn't that be more profitable? I think so, especially from the realm of race. Because dwelling on our differences is no way to, because it's like, just because, and we could talk stereotypes. What's stereotypes? Well, stereotypes is like blacks are good at basketball, right? Not true. There are some who are amazing at it, right? But it's like, I've met plenty of black guys that aren't good at basketball, right? They're not all good at it, right? It's like totally not true. But some of the best ones are blacks, right? The best ones. Because for some reason, they grow and the abilities and whatever, and you could argue, well, they're superior like that. They dominate football. When white guys get offended, well, we dominate whatever we dominate. We dominate this, that, the other. We can't say science, but we can say we dominate more than you do. More white people in science than there are black people. So we're smarter, or we think we are, or we're average smarter. Then you meet Thomas Sowell and you realize, there's some genius people in every race. Every race has its geniuses. Every race has its physical anomalies. The Jews had their Samson. They're not all built like Woody Allen. The Jews aren't all, they're muscled, because they're stereotypes. Just like the China, people think of Asians as small until you meet Yao Ming and he's like 6 or 7, whatever, big man. I remember my dad talking about the Chinese Navy, they're all 6 feet. Well, plus sometimes people, I think that the height in Japan is, the Japanese are somewhat smaller than the Chinese. Well, the Chinese have such a big nation. Who can say? There's so many ethnicities there. But anyways, so, point about that, just people, God's will and things happening. Bad things, bad people. Isn't it, and I can relate this to the merchandise, because it's like, isn't it God's will that the merchants be there? Isn't it God's will that they be there making merchandise of us? Pastors, that was the point about, I went from merchandise of the world to merchandise pastors. Because I'll tell you what, in the book of Revelation, chapter 19, that gets down into it. It talks about the merchandise of gold and of silver and of precious stones, of pearls and fine linen, of fine ointment and wood and brass and iron and silver and gold and beasts and sheep and marble and all this stuff. I don't have all of it in my mind right now. But and slaves and souls of men. The final piece of merchandise is men's souls, which probably means men's lives, but that might mean a spiritual component, because Mystery Babylon is more than just a commercial entity. Mystery Babylon is a sort of a religious figure. She is the queen who marries the king of Babylon, who is Satan, and she represents the wedding of the false church to the false Christ. That's what Mystery Babylon represents in the book of Revelation. She's the false church married to the false Christ. And she's Babylon because he is the king of Babylon, like we read in chapter 14. And she's closely associated with this mercantile thing because she is the cause, because of all the humans, of all this increased activity, because Satan, in the book of Revelation, he brings about this prosperity. Whereas it says in Daniel, by peace shall destroy many. He will bring about a prosperity. There will be kind of a Pax Satanas. That's a play on the idea of Pax Romanus, the Roman peace. The Pax Satanas, the peace of Satan. He will bring in a period of false peace. There'll be all kinds of crazy crap going on, but he'll actually be claiming it's all peace. Just like right now. It's not hard to see. You see how by peace they destroy many? There's a verse in Daniel that says, by peace he shall destroy many. And if it ever was any question that you could do such a thing, just take a look at our peaceful protests all last summer. All those peaceful protests resulting in whole cities basically burning to the ground. Or whole areas of city. I shouldn't say whole cities. But whole neighborhoods being burned to the ground. That's not that far off. Right? They virtually burned neighborhoods to the ground. Peacefully. So they'll say, it's all peaceful as Satan rounds people up and executes them. It's all peaceful as people are being, tortured. Or whatever. Just because it says peace, it's like, by peace shall destroy many can have a lot of meanings. It could mean, one thing, but it could mean what I just said. It could mean that. They just call it peace, but instead it's war. So when you think about a verse like that, and you saw a summer where you saw that exact thing where it's like, like Isaiah, woe to them that put evil for good and good for evil. They put light for darkness and darkness for light. They call peace war peace and peace war. We call darkness light, light darkness, good evil, evil good. That's what we're living in, a time of that, where people are saying what is good is evil and what is evil is good. And that is a progression of evil. Because we've had all kinds of sin, in our society for ages. But the society was also religious and, they were all tut-tutting and wagging their finger at it. But the overall arc of society was one of moral constraint. We've always had lots of sinners. There's always been homosexuals playing around in corners where they shouldn't be, right? There've always been guys sneaking off and doing things they shouldn't do. Not just that, but whatever, right? That's been around for ages. But what hasn't been around is our whole society. Well, it's been around before, but not for us. This is anew for us. This is us progressing into a new state of degradedness in our American experience as we become more heathen-like, more hedonistic. Not heathenistic, hedonistic, which means pleasure-seeking. Heathenistic meaning ungodly, unchristian. We become both. Heathen and hedon. The land of Kittim. We're going to pick up with verse 2. Because we haven't discussed verse 2 yet. Monday we'll pick up with verse 2. But verse 1, I would be remiss in not mentioning, just in this study, we'll mention in passing next time, Kittim. Now, a lot of times it's like, from the land of Kittim it is revealed to them. What does that mean? Or maybe I'll just tease that for Monday. What is Kittim? I remember Al Murray used to say, my false original teacher used to go, the bruisers, the bruisers, the bruisers, the Kittim. And speculating what Kittim is. The bruisers. And that's what I mean about looking up names and like, okay, Tyre means rock. Kittim means bruisers. An interesting title. It may even mean something. I mean, it does definitely a thing. But the thing, it's a place name. So, like I've said about my name, I mentioned before, Stringini, I think it means, well, stringa in Italian means squeeze. And ini is just a diminutive, like we put a Y on the end of it, like Frankie. That's a diminutive of Frank. Paulie, of Paul. Stringini, of stringa. All right, that's what it is. Stringa means squeeze, so it's squeezini. And I thought it actually, since my family comes from Abruzzi, this lawless region of Italy has been ungovernable for most of history. Even during the Roman Empire, it's where the bandits used to hide out, and they could never quite root them out in the mountains there because it's just mountains and stuff. It's hard to govern, like Afghanistan, where we still are, and we can't govern because you can't govern a region like that. It's always going to be inherently lawless and ruled over by ruled by an extremely heavy hand, because you cannot rule a lawless region without a heavy hand. I mean, it just doesn't work. I mean, there are areas of our country that could become lawless. They can, but it takes a heavy hand to root it out. That's all it is, to root it out once it gets embedded. It's not like it's just going to crop up out of nothing that you have just mountain bandits. But once there gets to be a tradition, Kittim means bruisers. To me, it sounds like Stringini. It's like we'll call ourselves the bruisers, the land of Kittim. Just like Israel means the prince of God. They gave themselves a nice name. Or they wrestle with God, or prevailed with God, or who wrestled with God and prevailed. That's what Isaiah means. I mean, not Isaiah. That's what Israel means. Israel. So it's a strong name that indicates. So being that this laying of waste is revealed from the land of Kittim, to me that I used to take that as like Kittim has something to do with the land of Tyre, but no. I think what it's saying is Tyre is laid waste. Remember, the ships of Tarshish come around every 3 years. I mean, they go on long journeys. And what I think it is, they hear the news from Kittim. I mean, they hear the news while they're yet far away. They hear the news of the fall of Tyre. And that's interesting, too, because that stays also with a prophetic theme when the merchants of the earth stand afar off watching the burning of Babylon. Just as these merchants are sort of portrayed as being a bit off and they see the fall of Tyre. Because they will lament over the thing, just like in the book of Revelation, where they lament over the great whore. So I'm sorry we didn't cover a lot of verses today, but I have enjoyed the study. I might even clip that first 15 minutes. The original, I would have liked to just, part of me would love to just get up and just start talking about subjects I want to talk about. But I like to constrain myself to the Bible. I just feel bad sometimes when I have a study. It's supposed to be on Isaiah. And if someone looks it up, they're going to be watching and seeing there's only one verse. But the thing is, I got to get that little card where I say how many verses are actually covered so then they can know. In fact, I may even list the next study as starting at verse 1 also, because we really didn't cover anything. We barely talked about Tyre. So thanks for joining me this day. Look forward to being back again on Monday. Until then, be blessed, say prayers, communicate with the Lord, seek perfection and sinlessness, because these are the things that please God. They do. So let's endeavor to be pleasing to Him. Let's be honest in it, though, not so that we will just, I don't want to claim to be perfect and then have to justify all my wicked deeds in order to stay that way. That's my point before. Like, my punching you in the face was righteous because I'm not a sinner. You know what I mean? And looking at that pornography, it couldn't have possibly been sinful because I'm a righteous man. That's what they end up doing. Well, it's acceptable. That's how guys like Ravi Zacharias begin justifying molesting their interns and crap and the young ladies that work for them. I'm an important minister of God. My ministry must be protected. And I'm horny, and so God must make a way for me to. It can't be sin because I'm doing it, and I'm so important, and God understands, and He sent this person in my way. You know, it's like creepy, disgusting, and I got no. He died like that. Good. Take it to the judgment, good old Rav. I already made a video. You remember I made that video about Ravi Zacharias? I didn't like that guy from the beginning. I didn't like the way, his condescending way he talked to the people that asked him questions. I want to say the F word right there about him. F you, Ravi Zacharias. Burn, as far as I'm concerned. You know? Burn. All the good he did. So what? It's all burned. You know what I mean? All the good they do is forgotten. Haven't you read the scriptures? You know what I mean? They do that kind of, oh, the good they did. Well, you know what? We'll take the good he did and leave him out of it. You know? You don't think all your works can be forgotten and given to someone else? Take the one talent given to him and give it to somebody else. That's what the Lord says. Take their talent and give it to him that hath 10. You know? Scumbag. Okay. Scumbag. Dirtbag. Bill Hybels, another one. Dirtbag. Dirtbag. Big ministry dirtbag. In fact, you can count that at the top of every big ministry that looks shiny and glossy and kind of like run by Satan, you could probably figure that the guy at the top of that is run by Satan is a dirtbag. I always think of Charles Stanley, because for some reason I like Charles Stanley. I don't totally agree with him on everything, but I liked him. And I don't know, maybe that's misplaced because I didn't listen to him very much. But every time I would hear Charles Stanley, I was like, I don't hate Charles Stanley. So I don't know. I just pull him out like because like I just because I know he's one guy I'm not gonna rip on. I don't know enough. I should probably go listen to him and then say I should make a video why I don't like Charles Stanley anymore. I don't think I liked him. I just didn't hate him because he came off as sincere and conscientious, which I like. I like sincere, conscientious people, even if they're wrong. You know what I mean? Like the kind of guy who seems like he really cares about what he does. I like that. When I sense a bit of the schmarminess, if that's a word, I mean, you know, the sleazebaggedness, the shiny suitedness, I get triggered a bit. I get a macro aggression against that, you know. Actually, microaggressions are supposed to be directed at, I'm the aggressor. But I take it as, when I see a preacher preaching falseness, it does feel a bit aggressive. It used to be, I get very angry. Because I was a much stronger believer in free will and not understanding the will of God. Like how God's, like needing to fight that and getting so angry about it and not realizing that it's there for me to, Jesus said, the poor you have always with you, but me you have not always with you. Let me give you another one, okay? This is every bit as true. The wicked you have always with you. You know? The wicked you have always with you, and you always have a chance to fight the wicked. There's always going to be wicked out there. Don't have to worry about them getting away or stopping before you get a chance to yell. You know, there's lots of wicked to go around, and there's plenty of time for us to oppose them. I mean, as far as, I don't mean we should be slothful. I just mean there's room for some patience. Patience to at least get your ducks in a row, to prepare yourself. You want to fight for God? Prepare yourself. I'll tell you what, the servants of Satan are well prepared. They're well prepared. It troubles me, because I feel like they're better than me. They are. They're better than me. Thank God it's not me. You know, right? Thank God we're dependent on the Lord, not on Paul Strangini. Because they're better than me. But I have God. And, how should one chase 1,000 or two put 10,000 to flight? It's like, because when I have God with me, it doesn't matter how weak I am. That's God's glory. He's like, look at this weak piece of garbage. Look what I can do with that. Sometimes when I despair and I think, I think like, hey, I'm not doing as much with my talents as I should be doing. I'm not doing as much with my abilities. I'm not working as hard as I should be. I'm not mentally always in the right places, And I could get on myself about that. And think like, I'm not good enough. I'll never please God. Or, I can never really please. I'm never going to be able to do everything that could be done. I'm going to make the wrong decisions. There's all kinds of fears, because God gives me decisions to make. Or he doesn't tell me what his will is. You know what I mean? It's like a lot of things. Because I have to do things. And God has to, if he wants me to do something, he has to inform me on some level so I know what I'm supposed to do. Otherwise, I have to try to figure it out with the wisdom he's given me. I mean, God gives us wisdom to use it. You know what I mean? Just like when he gives talents, he wants us to use those talents. He gives us wisdom, he wants us to use the wisdom. He doesn't want us to just, one, assume whatever happens, but also assume that, or whatever. You know what I mean? We got to use it. That's the point. I'm going to get off in the weeds again. So let us use that power. It doesn't matter if we are my point about it doesn't matter, because he can use the worse I am, the more glory God gets when he uses me. Because even when I'm using his gifts, I'm using them and doing well, and he can be rightly happy with me. Well done, thou good and faithful servant, he can say. But also, he knows that without that gift, I'm pretty powerless. And he also knows he can give me even greater gifts. He can make it so the very words that come out of my mouth light my enemies on fire. I mean, I really believe in that. I put that into a song. I don't know if it's literally true or figuratively true, but if it's figuratively true, that's good enough. Because I would be happy to burn my enemies down with my tongue. Even if that only meant that I shut them up. You know what I mean? Like if it's just a mouth and wisdom that my enemies cannot gainsay or resist. To me, that was almost as close enough to fire proceeds out of their mouth and kills their enemies. I mean, because I could see how, like, if someone tries to kill me and I could open my mouth and say things that would make them drop their gun or whatever and turn them not into an enemy anymore but a friend or whatever, or that would literally strike them dead, that's a power that's very useful. Even if it's not striking them dead, even if it's just the power to torment them internally, even if it's the power to get into their heads, whatever power, but it'll be to God's glory, because I can't do things like that. I can't stop the wicked. The world is too big a place. The government, this whole year, it's like, what could I do about it? I can just sing about it and a few hundred people will listen. Pastors influence if all the pastors in America would resist the tyranny, but they didn't. They thought their duty was to just go along with it. Maybe it was. I don't know. Maybe I was wrong. I don't think so. But hey, that's the nature of decision. You think you're right and you stick with it because you don't want to admit you're wrong. I think I should look back at some point and say, was I right about that? I haven't done it yet. I'm too close to it. I feel too strongly to even consider second guessing myself. It's not. It won't even enter my mind as like a consideration that I was wrong about the pandemic. You know why? Because I keep getting proven right. That's why. People write, Anyways, I'm taking up your time. Thanks for doing this study. You can always bug off right after I say thanks for joining me to study the first time. See you tomorrow, or see you Monday. See me Monday. Tashish.
How ye inhabitants of the isle, is this your joyous city, whose antiquity is of ancient days? Her own feet shall carry her afar off to sojourn. Who hath taken this counsel against Tyre, the crowning city?